Richard Allen, you child murderer! Why did you do it? Shame on you! Shame on you, Richard!
Now for what's tipping the scales of justice, convicted killer Richard Allen learned his punishment on Friday. Special Judge Fran Gull sentencing him to 130 years in prison for the February 2017 murders of Abby Williams and Libby German in Delphi, Indiana. No cameras were allowed in the courtroom during sentencing, just like the trial. But Court TV's Barbara McDonald was there in the courtroom and said that Judge Gull chastised Allen for his behavior toward her.
As she talked to him, she said at one point, you know, these families will deal with your carnage forever. And then she kind of paused, looking at him. And then she said, and you sit here and you roll your eyes at me as you have throughout this trial. So clearly not making a good impact on the judge.
All right, so Richard Allen perhaps is going to be taking an appeal next, and many people are wondering whether he could be successful on appeal. Let's talk about it. Let's bring back in sensational trial attorneys Tommy Pope and Kirk Nurmi. Okay, does this guy have a prayer on appeal? Kirk Nurmi, what do you think?
Look, mathematically, no. I mean, probably about 5% of appeals are successful, but this is a special case. I mean, we talk about tipping the scales of justice. I don't know if there was any scales of justice in Judge Gull's courtroom, right? I mean, we see that in the end, even in the sentencing soliloquy, she's not talking about the victim. She's not talking about the crime. She's talking about herself. She's bringing it about her. She certainly made this about her a lot through the trial, but we go back to the exclusion of her lawyers, the denial of counsel. She certainly kept the cameras out of the courtroom, not maybe necessarily an appellate issue, but certainly one of the other issues that are going to be looked at, considering the defense didn't object to it. Also, add to that, and the most important, the conditions of confinement that she ordered upon him, and the blocking of his defense. Not a defense that Martians came down, not a defense without any substantiation. The police investigated the possibility of odinism, and she denied him to present a case. She really, to me, did a lot of carnage to the rights due Mr. Allen. And as I've said before on this show, you know, justice just isn't a destination, it's a journey. And here the journey was so misplaced, and the journey is almost more important than the destination in this country. And she did such a poor job at managing this journey.
Beautifully said, Kirk. I love everything you just said there. I want to zone in on something you mentioned so key about how she restricted the defense from presenting anything about Odinism. It's like she conducted a fact-finding mission prior to the trial happening and said, oh, this just has no place or has no bearing. Tommy Pope, as a former prosecutor, curious if you were on this case, if you would have rather had it come in to not run the risk of it coming back on appeal later.
Julie, I remember when I was a young prosecutor and I was with the senior prosecutor in a death penalty case, and I felt like he was trying the case for the defense. You know, he was making sure they made motions. He was making sure that things got in, and, you know, it just blew my mind. Why were we helping them? And, you know, I came to understand he was making a record, and he was making sure that the record held up when it went up on appeal. You know, Kurt talks about the journey. You know, that journey is full of minefields, you know, particularly on the prosecution side. And some of the things you think logically you'd want to just fight, it may be better letting it come in. And like you said, you wouldn't have an appellate issue, that the defense would get a more full representation and defend their client, and there'd be less likelihood that we would see a case get overturned.
Great points. Tommy, thank you for that. I want to play a clip. This is from the superintendent with the Indiana State Police. His name is Douglas Carter, and he was talking about how he didn't see Richard Allen rolling his eyes, as the judge had said that she saw him do. Let's take a look.
No, I had no idea. I heard Nick was asked that same question, and he didn't see it either. I'll bet the jury did. But again, the jury sees both sides, the state, the defense, the witnesses, Richard Allen. Sees how people coming, how they go, but even Nick didn't notice it.
Okay, so Kirk Nurmi, you know, there's someone else in the courtroom didn't see it. What might you do with these things if you're defense counsel for him?
Well, look, the rolling of the eyes is not going to be an appellate issue, right? But everything else she did was, right? And that could be used as an example, an exemplification of what she did. I mean, going back to, again, the denial of counsel, why there was no basis for that. That got overturned. It shows an inherent bias that she has towards him. Now, would that affect the sentencing? No, I think she was going to give him 130 years. She had every right to do that. But again, making it about herself shows maybe that personal bias. So you kind of maybe use that as fodder to go this whole idea that Judge Gull was not a fair and impartial person to preside over this case. As you mentioned, too, she did fact-finding that really should be reserved for the jury. And that's, again, going back to what Tommy said, you want to put that in front of the jury, you don't have that appellate issue if the jury rejects it. If the judge who is biased rejects it before it even comes in, then you have a huge appellate issue and a viable one for Mr. Allett.
So true. Excellent insight from you both, as per usual. Tommy Pope, Kirk Nurmi, thank you so much for everything this morning. Thanks for making time on Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to you and your beautiful families. We'll see you soon. And that is all for this episode of Opening Statements. But up next, Court TV Live begins. I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. We're going to New York as Luigi Mangione is being arraigned.